So, there are a lot of questions here. This is about, I've been teaching for a few years now, and I find it difficult to drop that role even doing personal practice. How do I let go of my group and remain here for me? So that this is these words like teacher is another convention that we need to recognize is an identity and how to use it so we're not attached or that feeling that that's my identity. So how I've done it is just a teaching, even though my name's Ajahn Sumedho. Ajahn means teacher, that in Thai, it's a kind of title, conventional title, but teacher, when is it appropriate? Mindfulness allows me to know when teaching is the thing to do and when it's not. So it's being aware of time and place, and so this is mindfulness and wisdom. If I think I'm a teacher, ongoing teacher, even when I'm asleep, somebody comes see me and they say, Ajahn Sumedho is sleeping now, and the impression is that I'm even teaching while I'm asleep. But that's a convention, isn't it? It's just a name and that, but I'm certainly not teaching when I'm sleeping, and also it gets in the way, like thinking I am a teacher, therefore I have to teach you something. So some people that are obsessed with being teachers, they always have to have students to teach, and that can be a pain, isn't it? You have to be somebody's student all the time. So this is but that's the logic. If your main identity is I'm a teacher, then unquestioningly you relate to people as a teacher, and then even your friends or husband or wife, for that, become your students. Teacher-student, that's a conventional relationship. When is that appropriate? And so this sakkaya ditthi, when the attachment to this identity becomes sakkaya ditthi, and when it's not. So this is, it becomes sakkaya ditthi when I'm a teacher, and then I feel I have to teach all the time. My relationship to people is teaching them, and then I feel that people should listen and respect what I say, and then and then I get upset when people kind of reject my teaching, and so when it becomes sakkaya ditthi, then you're putting yourself in a position where you're going to suffer. Also, being a teacher is also a position of responsibility, because you're teaching, you're talking about things, you're in a powerful position, people listening, and people project all kinds of things onto teachers. So they say, my teacher, you're my teacher, and the teacher, can feel that he or she has to, be responsible for the students, and also to keep that very clear. So sometimes you really take yourself as a teacher terribly serious. You kind of relax with anybody, because it would put you in a state where you're not the role of the teacher is no longer operating. So I've known monks who operate as teachers almost all the time, and they can never relax because of it. And so these are abbot of a monastery or any position of authority that is, if taken and not reflected on, then becomes another form of sakyaditi. And then you get lonely because you set yourself up always as having to be this, and also like being a Buddhist monk, you've got this idea that you've got to be an impeccable example to others. So you feel this sense of burden of always having to set a high standard of impeccability all the time in the monastery. And this makes you incredibly lonely, because you're no longer human. You're always acting the role, sitting very straight and being incredibly mindful and afraid of telling a joke or relaxing because somebody might think that you're losing it or you're not serious. And then people, expect teachers or senior monks or nuns to be living examples of purity and goodness. So then when they see anger in us or something, they could become disillusioned. Because they want, maybe you want me to be perfect for you, the impeccably wise, kind Ajahn, meditation master. And then when you see me when I'm not living up to your high standard of what you want, then you become disillusioned. So you get criticism. I've disillusioned a lot of people in my life, not out of intention, but because this I've done it, and also this is where this mindfulness is the only way to be free from suffering. Becoming an Ajahn is can be another form of suffering. Or becoming a Buddhist monk or nun, you think that can be another form of suffering. Another sakyaditi problem. So then there's some that go the other way. I'm not an Ajahn. I don't want to be an Ajahn. I don't want to be a teacher. Look at those teachers. They're always, teaching us, and then, they think, I don't want to be like that. And teachers have special meetings of teachers' meetings that students can't come to, and you feel left out. And that they're probably plotting something, getting together to find out, how to, cause you more misery. You get paranoid around authority, or anyone that has a position of power over you. So then you can go the opposite. I don't want to ever be a teacher or be in an authoritative position. I just want to be an ordinary person. I don't want to be special. I just want to be an ordinary person. And I want to be so ordinary that I'm special. I'm more ordinary than Ajahn Emerald. It gets ridiculous, doesn't it? How, whatever position you take of wanting to be important and respected and looked up to, and be a successful teacher and be praised. Or the other is, I don't want that. I have utter contempt for the conceit and the arrogance that comes from people in power. And then you can name instances where you've seen all kinds of unpleasantness to justify, so that you're taking pride in your ordinariness or your humility. And so whatever on Sakyaditi level, one going from one extreme to the other, this is where the mindfulness is the only way out of that, is to see that however you create yourself is just an ordinary person, nobody special, or a very special person, that's a creation you make and attach to. And when you see that this is a condition that you've created, an identity that you're attached to, then you begin to recognize the suffering that comes from attaching to any sense of yourself as being anything, good, bad, ordinary, special. So it's power. The students that are training to be teachers, met with them in the morning of the first day, and they're talking about power and authority. These are, need to be understood, not in terms of my power or my authority and my responsibility, but how to be mindful of the conditions. Like right now I'm in a powerful position, sitting here, talking to you, because everybody's looking at me, and then I'm in a position of power. Now you can, how to use this power then is discerning. How, if I'm just using it for myself out of Sakyaditi, then I can be, a tyrant. I'm just using it, holding on to it, and won't let anybody else have it because I want it, or I won't let go. Like Mugabe in Zimbabwe, where you'll destroy the whole thing out of your determination to keep power is one extreme. So then if people empower me, they give me their attention, their trust, they're giving me power, then it's how to use that, in a skillful way. Not just, if I'm just using it for my own emotional needs, then that's not that isn't mindfulness. That's a neurotic need of, wanting to be empowered and be given authority, and so that I can somehow feel I'm important and powerful person. But if I find myself in a powerful position like this, then how to use this position. So this is what I've been doing over this retreat. The reflections I give are, my intention is to empower you. I'm not interested in maintaining an illusion of I'm your teacher and you're my student, and need that kind of want to keep that relationship as an ongoing, unquestionable role of my life. But I see the way, from my experience in teaching in the West, the problems of Western people, European people, or Americans who come to Buddhism when they're adults, and they don't have the the cultural foundation, say, that people born in Buddhist countries have. And we have a mindset based on Judaism and Christianity and Western science. That's even if you're not Jewish or Christian, it's still very strong. The attitudes of our civilization. The thing that is very much, that's the basis of the Christian creation theory, or the Darwinian theory, or the reason, the modern science and its analysis and reason is one, but that's also usually underpinned by a kind of Judeo-Christian assumptions of cultural conditioning that's part of like the underlying a particular culture or civilization. So in Asia, you have different, like Buddhism, Taoism in China, Hinduism in India. These are not theistic forms of religious practice. So they are, even with Hinduism, with all its deities, with Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, and Indra, and Parvati, and all the rest. These are not taken as in the way that we would, from this civilization, take it. So we see it as, from the Christian view, as they believe in all kinds of gods and idols, so they worship idols. I remember I spent a few months in Benares 5 years ago, in Varanasi, and there used to be this Kali shrine near where I was staying. So this friend of mine would take me down to have tea every evening, and I'd be looking at this Kali shrine, and it looked like a demon to a Western mind. A black female with her tongue hanging out, necklace of skulls, and that's like a demon mask in our cultural perception. And then necklace of skulls. That's and with their tongue out, looking fierce, and the goddess of destruction and all that kind of thing. So, when the British colonial period, they just thought they worshipped demons, because that's the cultural interpretation. That's how maybe you first would see it. But that's not how a Hindu sees it. And so their icons come from a different place than say the way we would see it. And this is cultural and religious. So in our own, like in my own experience being brought up in Christian family, it's a very dualistic conditioning I've had. It's heaven and hell, right? Absolute right and wrong, and good and bad. And this is these are, God is unquestionable, and God and Jesus, these are. And we've taught that Jesus, this is historical, and so that somehow, because it's historical, it must be right. But if you're a historian, you realize how much history is not particularly the truth, and how it is one way of looking at it. When I was studying for my master's at Berkeley in Indian culture, read a history of India written by a British historian or by an Indian about the same period. You wouldn't know it was the same country. So and is one right or the other wrong, or is it the way a British colonial a European mindset would view India and the history that took place during the British period, or from the Indian position. So this takes reflection, isn't it? It's not, and so that pointing to this unconditioned, unborn, and encouraging you to awaken is what I'm trying to, the teaching. If you think this is a teaching, then it's more like encouragement, or you can even see it as an empowerment, because I'm not trying to really teach you. I'm not asking you to believe anything that I say, that this is the real Buddhist teaching and my interpretation is right, and anyone who disagrees is wrong, and then I become a teacher, who always has to be right by putting down everyone else. And so, when you always have to be right, then you also have to, anyone that doesn't go along with you is wrong, because it's dualistic. See? Then right or wrong, wrong or right. Then the story I tell about, training with Ajahn Chah. Now his emphasis was so much on the Vinaya discipline, the training of a monk with this discipline called the Vinaya. So the Vinaya is then after about 3 or 4 years with Ajahn Chah, I went to visit Buddhadasa at Watsuan Mok in Suratani. And so Ajahn Buddhadasa asked me, he didn't really know much about Ajahn Chah or anything, so he asked me what I was. I said, well, we practice the Vinaya very strictly. And he says, you just need to be mindful, you don't need the Vinaya. That was a big shock, because told the other that you have to have the Vinaya, and then here this great teacher who Ajahn Chah praises says you don't need it. So it's a bit, because that is, when you've committed yourself to one teacher's view, then the opposite is confusing, or you feel they're wrong. So when I went back to Wat Pah Pong, I told Ajahn Chah what Buddhadasa said. And then Ajahn Chah said, true but not right, right but not true. An interesting reply. Jing that might tuk, tuk that might jing. He said in Thai you can say it very nicely. So and so this was like a koan. Because my mindset was, well, if it's right, it's true, and if it's true, it's right. That's my logic from my Christian background. If it's true, then it's right. And anything right is true. Don't you? That's kind of just common sense, isn't it? And then Luang Por Chah said, true but not right, right but not true. And that put me in a state of more confusion. But it actually meant a lot, because if Luang Por Chah said Buddhadasa is wrong, then I would have grasped that and said he's wrong and Ajahn Chah's right. Or if I become disillusioned with Ajahn Chah, then I start thinking, well, maybe Buddhadasa is right and Luang Por Chah isn't. So you're in this, according to grasping of right and wrong. But this is, you don't have to become a monastic or keep the Vinaya as an absolute. Or to hold that, that you have to, or you don't have to. So that's another Sakkaya Ditthi, to hold that you have to is still Sakyaditi, and that you don't have to Sakyaditi. So it's true but not right, right but not true. And this knowing then is what, Luang Por Chah was pointing at. Not taking sides or, putting another teacher down, but pointing to actually the confusion of my cultural mindset, which was, if it's true, it's right. So this is, then one time, Ajahn Chah said to me, you must be confused sometimes, Sumedho, because Dhamma is all about letting go and Vinaya is all about attachment. So in the Theravada tradition, before the Buddha passed away, he said, I leave you the Dhamma Vinaya. So he's got the Dhamma and the Vinaya. And then Luang Por Chah says, well, Dhamma is all about letting go, and Vinaya is about attachment. So he said, when you figure this out, you'll be okay. There's another. But these things do, they stay in, I found them quite useful because you can, when you're training with conventional forms, and they're very strict, and and we hold, this sense of purity of Vinaya and tradition and so forth. This can make us very cultish and very, very critical of anything that isn't quite up to our standard. The higher standards you have, the more critical you become of everyone else. So having high standards is good, isn't it? We think to have high principles and high standards. You say that's a praise. She has very high standards. She's a very principled person. Is a compliment. Then also, if one attaches to high principles and standards out of ignorance, then you become supercilious. You start looking down on others whose standards are lower. You say, seeing yourself as superior. You say, I have much more integrity, I'm much more honest. I would never stoop to do the things that person does because I'm principled and I have very high standards for life. And so then you find, yourself in a state of criticizing others all the time. That don't live up to your principles or standards. So notice that this is dualism of, high and low principles which are good. High principles are good, but notice it's the ignorance, the avijja, the identity with this, and the clinging, the attachment to these high standards leads to suffering. Now this there's a point of investigating this, finding this out. Because recognize one's own cultural conditioning is, in my instance, because I can only speak from my own experience, but I had a very strong dualistic mindset. And the way I picked up strict Vinaya was a very highly principled standard of righteousness. And I suffered a lot from that. And then Dhamma, of course, is about letting go. But if you attach to fixed views about Dhamma, like Orthodox Theravada says this, or we quote scriptures to prove our point. So I've seen monks who are in authoritative positions. They get in terrible arguments about the scriptures. So the paticca samuppada, the dependent origination. There used to be a quarrel going on, in about whether it's three-life theory or simultaneous arising in the present. And one monk said, it's not that simultaneous arising in the present, rubbish. It's three lives and that's it. And then he start with authority, and then he would quote proof for this position from scriptures, from Pali scriptures. And then you could do the same for the other. You can find quotes from Pali Buddhism that support simultaneous arising. So then, maybe both are right or wrong. But anyway, now my experience of this was, the more authoritative and certain and opinionated somebody was, it was very powerful. I know that it's three lives and the other is wrong. It's heresy. And then now that affects my dualistic Christian background. I was brought up in the Episcopal church, but it was very high church, we called Anglo-Catholic. So it was the only one in Seattle, and we were very snooty. Everybody in this church thought they were better than all the Protestants and the low church Episcopalians. It was, you develop this sense of superiority and what's right and how principled and standards and I remember during my childhood the priest would, if he didn't cross himself in the right places, there'd be like a whole, a protest that he was letting down the high principles of our church, and that so there was endless criticisms going on about what is a real Christian message and what is right and what is wrong. And so this church had certain good qualities, High church Anglicanism is quite beautiful, so it has beautiful ceremonies and it's quite moving. But on the level of grasping in this position, it became very cruel and narrow-minded. So this is, seeing that as a child growing up in that environment, it really put me off. I thought, I don't want to be like that. It's, I don't want to be exclusive and snobbish and feel always that I have to protect the purity and the sanctity by, rubbishing everyone else that doesn't agree. So that's one of the attractions to that I found that drew me to Buddhism, was that it was a questioning investigation of life, not just a high standard, principle standard, absolutizing morality, and then judging everything else by these high standards and high principles and orthodox teachings. Because I've heard Buddhist monks say, all the other religions are, they're wrong, and it's Theravada Buddhism that is the real Buddhism. It's the original Buddhism, and Mahayana Buddhism is not, the Buddha didn't teach that. And so they come from this position of we're right and everyone else is wrong. That's dualism, isn't it? That's attachment to a position. Now you can check this out in your own, this is thinking. Thinking is like this. Right and wrong are opposed to each other. And so then, or cancel out each other. Then you have in Eastern thought, you have right, wrong, both right and wrong, neither right nor wrong. You have much more, intellectually you're given a freedom that you don't have in this very dualistic tight structure that I was conditioned with. because I found it, very, as a way of thinking, very, very uncomfortable. But that's how I thought. That's the thought patterns were from that assumption, that cultural religious assumption of absolutizing right and wrong, heaven and hell, good and bad. Now, this is where this this emphasis on there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. Therefore, there is escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. Now, nothing like that ever. That would have made no sense to me from that dualistic way of thinking. This is, or you can oppose. The unconditioned is here and the conditioned is here. Never the twain shall meet. Or, in Theravada sometimes monks will say, they don't like this idea, samsara and nibbana as being together. They're totally separate. This is samsara, this is nibbana. And so this is still dualism, isn't it? And you could say unconditioned and conditioned is dualism. But it's not, recognize that it's the unconditioned is not defined. It's not a principle. It has no images, but it's recognizable. And then the Buddha points to the way to recognize the unborn, uncreated is with awareness. So the gates to the deathless are open. The deathless, what's that? Can you imagine the deathless? Well, when I start thinking of unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, trying to think of it in just with my thoughts, it ends up as a kind of annihilation. If there's nothing, the whole aim is to realize, to abide in the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. There's no self, no soul, no God. It's merely, all this self, this culture, your own thinking process, you relinquish it, you get rid of it, and then and that sounds like annihilation. I have no personality, it's all rubbish, everything is delusion, and so the aim of a Buddhist is to extinguish the world, is to get rid of yourself. And when there's no world, no self, there's nothing. That's how the thinking process works. Now the wisdom faculty is, in the first sermon, the Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta, after the Buddha's enlightenment, he said this is not eternalism nor annihilationism. This is Majjhima Patipatta, or the middle way. Gama Sukha Likanu Yoko Attakila Matanu Yoko. This is one extreme, the eternalist one and the annihilationist one. He said this is not annihilation. Nor is it eternalism, which is like the Western view of immortality, like Greek gods as being immortal, is that they're born but they never die. Like you can have Hera or Zeus, Aphrodite, and so forth. And they have form, they're female, male, they have different qualities, but they're immortals. And they were born, but they never die. Well, that is, this is like, so our view of immortality, which really means deathless, is about being born and then that's eternalism. Where you rewarded your eternal soul, which is your personality, really. Goes and lives forever with Jesus. And God. That's eternalism. Or the other is when you're dead, nothing left, oblivion, zero. Dark hole, black hole, void. And so these are the two extremes. Now, those are extremes in conceptualization, isn't it, in thinking. Now notice that in the unborn, this is just a negation of the born, the unborn. It's not a denial or a judgment. But what is it? It's not, you don't grasp the concept of the unborn, and not asked to do that or believe in the unborn, but to awaken. So this is the essence of Buddhism, of Buddha Dhamma, is awakened consciousness. So it's like wake up here and now, simple as that. Awake, the gate to the deathless is open. Then your relationship to the conditioned or the samsara is knowing it. So you're not annihilating it or destroying it, but knowing. And you're seeing it as it is. You're seeing conditioned phenomena as impermanent. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. But you're not projecting those concepts onto the body or anything. These are more helpful suggestions towards observing. Because we, with the dualistic structure of thinking, then you don't tend to notice how things change or the ending of things. So there's always a hope that we can get. I've heard in modern times people say we will conquer death. We already are overpopulated on this planet. And then just think, if I'm going to live forever in this body, that's not very happy thought, is it? I'm tired of it already. To make it live forever is a nightmare, like the Flying Dutchman. You just, but then if you've never questioned or examined or investigated your life or consciousness, then you might be afraid of death. So you'd rather spend forever in your human body when it's 74 years old. Imagine having to be 74 forever. It's better to get here when you're young and beautiful. But anyway, I missed that possibility. So it isn't Dhamma. It's not. We would say that's not Dhamma. It's not the way things are. So when you point to the Dhamma, it's not a critical or judgmental function. It's a discerning. Now this word discern is about sati, sampachanya, satipanya. So what do you discern? Is it like we are experiencing conditioned phenomena right now, with the body as it is, with your sense experiences, your eyes, ears. Like I've had this macular degeneration, so I've had to deal with fading vision, things like this as I get older. So my eyes are degenerating. This is the way it is. The conditions are impermanent. So this is more useful way of reflecting than from Sakkaya. I don't know. How can we? I don't want to go blind, Then I get into panic and it's all very miserable even before anything like that happens. Now they talk in Britain. They talk about macular degeneration all the time. It's everybody's working the ways of curing. I've had treatments in Bangkok at a very good eye hospital. They have all kinds of ways of helping now. So it's not, but to say fix my eyes so that they were like they were before I was 40, forever, I have no longing for that. This is good enough, until the body dies. But it's, death is just the end of what was born. So this body was born and it will die. And that's Dhamma. You're seeing it in terms of Dhamma, or the way it is. Did I ask for this body? I don't remember. I don't even remember being born. But my mother did. So, and so it makes, it seems reasonable to assume that this body was born, because everyone else's is. Then it's this age, and it will die. But did I ask for this? I don't remember asking for it. This is what happened. So this is, so it's not like the body isn't mine. It is like the trees or any other forms in nature, natural forms. They arise and cease. They are born and they live their span and die. And that's the way it is. So that which knows the birth and the death. Like, I don't remember physically being born, but I've seen a lot of mental births arise. Emotional surges or thoughts like this. Your mind, you become aware when things arise in you, when things begin and end, when happiness is present and when it's absent. That's discernment, isn't it? Happiness is I feel happy now, and then when it's not, when it's absent, it's not unhappy. The absence of happiness isn't unhappiness, but it's, when that feeling of getting what I want and being on top of the world is no longer present, then there's a recognition of its absence. That's discerning. So, if the condition for happiness, if I attach to it as some kind of personal need and goal in life to be forever happy, and always seek happiness as my goal, then I'm constantly on the, trying to, do the very things that make me happy. So, like saying getting what you want is a form of happiness. That kind of feeling when you want something and you get it and you feel this, like this. I call that one form of happiness. Well, then I get what I want. I have a few moments of happiness. It's gone. I can't sustain it. And so then there's discerning, when you begin to see, when you get what you want, it's like this, and then but then it's not permanent. It changes, and then it's not. It's not unhappy, but it's like this. And so this is where this sound of silence, or this unborn, uncreated attitude is more. So you're informing yourself around the gaps, or what most of life is really, what you're experiencing, what's happening all the time. So you're not just living your life for those peak moments when you get what you want, and the rest is just spend desperately trying to get what you want. Because we can live our lives always trying to become a millionaire, or get something we want. And we can work very hard and be miserable and tense and get heart problems and diabetes, working desperately so that we can make lots of money because that's what I want. So then, say I'm successful, I make lots of money, and then what happens? If I'm not very mindful, then I want more money than that. So it goes on and on and on. So, or then there's the fear of losing it. Or then you begin to awaken, is this how I want to spend my life? Just trying to get more, trying to find happiness by so much of my life being quite stressed and miserable. Working hard and doing all kinds of things to make lots of money. And then when I do get it, then you have a certain feeling of success and happiness, but it's not, it goes away. So you discern, and through this discernment, then wisdom is, you see that if you're constantly caught up in desire for success, worldly success, that there's always this anxiety about being a failure. If you want success, you always have the fear of failure. They go together. You get one with the other. Because that's dualistic. That's the way conditioned phenomena works. If you have birth and you have death, because we are born, we're going to die, these bodies. It's the way it is. So birth is the cause of death. Those that are never born never die. There's probably all kinds, the unconditioned. If we recognize the unborn, which is here and now, then that which is born and dies or begins and ends is seen in terms of, it's not a judgment, or we can discern its quality, but our intention for living, is to do good and refrain from doing the bad things. So that, we can, with mindfulness, then we have spontaneity. We can respond to life. And that awakeness is based on metta and compassion, so that our relationship to the society, to family, to friends, to the world around us, it's not just indifference, everything's going to die anyway, and everything, it's all an illusion, so to hell with it. That's not wisdom or discernment, it's merely rejection, judgment, meaning that because it's impermanent, it isn't any good. But conditions vary. Sometimes they're good and sometimes they aren't. One conditions the other. Nothing's permanently good. High principles and high standards, high ideals are good, but by grasping them out of ignorance, then you're going to be quite miserable, because life isn't about, it's not about everything should, you get into this, it should be, we should all be high principled with high standards of conduct, and we should all be good, and we should all be, then it is into the shoulds and the idealism, and then we see, from our experience of life, that that's not the way life is. And if we have no wisdom, then we become cynical and embittered. We're cynics, we're once probably idealistic people with high principles, because it's all, you become disillusioned when through experience, if you're attached to high ideals and standards and principles out of ignorance. So then these are seen in terms of like guiding stars, high ideals and high standards and high principles. They are beautiful. like a guiding star is high up in the sky. You'll never reach it, but it guides you on the path. It's something to keep, to use. But you can't always, if you're always looking at the guiding star, you're going to fall off the cliff. You also need to know where you are. Look at the ground and observe. The ditch or the barrier or the rattlesnake. You walk around here with your eyes up in the stars. You can get bit by a rattlesnake. So we need also to keep aware of the ground and where we are, where this body is, and one doesn't cancel out the other. So that it's not a matter of we shouldn't be idealistic or have ideals. It's how to use ideals so that they're guides rather than Sakya Ditti. Because being human is like this, it's not an ideal state. We have to deal with old age, which is not an ideal state. It is the way it is. When we create an ideal image of a man or woman, it's usually a perfection in form of the male or female form, in marble or some beautiful substance. And when they're young and beautiful. And so so you can create an ideal female form or an ideal male form out of marble or copper or whatever. But our forms are not that. They're like this: skin and blood and nerves. And so you're beginning to inform yourself that the human birth, the human condition, it's like this. It's not about becoming a marble statue, but about being awake and aware within the limitations you find yourself, even if you have all kinds of physical disabilities and infirmities. These are not obstructions to enlightenment. You don't need the perfect physical body for enlightenment, because none of us would have any hope for that. And so so we idealize form, which is fine, but recognize it is an ideal. And ideals, marble statues don't feel anything. So we have to feel life, with our human, this human state. This is, as I've said before, sensitivity. This is the total sensitivity from birth to death. And sensitivity means that you don't just feel pleasure and beauty, is it? If there's pleasure, there's pain. If there's beauty, there's ugliness. They go together. If there's birth, there's death. They belong to each other. And so this awareness of that is not critical or judgmental. If I'm being judgmental, then I think that's wrong. If I were God, I would have created permanent beauty and pleasure. I would not have, when I was a child, brought up as a Christian, I used to wonder, why did God create pain? Because, as a little boy, fall down, hurt yourself, and pain. Why, if God created everything, why did God create pain? I wouldn't have. If I were God, I wouldn't have created mosquitoes, for one thing. I wouldn't have created... So it's... and then my mother would say, well, she'd find some way of explaining it, But it was, this ideal of God creating everything as an ideal. But then in Dhamma practice, we're noticing the way it is. It's not an ideal, but it's like this, the way it is. And it's not, the way it is not is not a passive kind of negative resignation to misery, but it's a way of reminding yourself life is like this. The question about if everything's perfect, then what about what happened in Burma? Is that perfect? Well, no. Perfection isn't about the condition. The perfection of this is there is the unborn, therefore there's escape from the born. But what's happened, the tsunami or the catastrophes in Burma and China, these are, wanting to blame people for them, or the governments, but it's Mother Nature, or blame Mother Nature or God sending punishment down because Burmese are so wicked. They needed to be, but they got the wrong Burmese, didn't they? They didn't kill the wicked ones. But notice that it's not justifying, but recognizing that planet life and having a body like this, we're subject to the changes of planets and Earth and earthquakes and typhoons and all the rest. These are just a part of this realm that that we that affect our lives. But our refuge is not in getting rid of them or blaming them on, but in finding, realizing the deathless here and now in this moment. Where then, when these things happen to us, we have, we probably have a much better ability to deal with catastrophe than if we didn't know, if all we had was just ignorance and sense of loss and despair that comes from losing the loved and property and all the rest. So I offer this for your consideration.
Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantang Abhivademi Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami